All right, let's dive into a story that honestly has it all. We're talking glamour, immense power, family betrayal, and yeah, cold-blooded murder. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely wild true story behind one of the most famous names in fashion, Gucci.
I mean, it's a huge question, right? It sounds like something straight out of a movie. But for the Gucci family, this was their reality. And to really get the answer, we have to look at how a dynasty that was built on luxury leather goods completely unraveled into this epic Shakespearean level tragedy. So we're actually going to start at the end. Picture this. It's a Monday morning in Milan. Maurizio Gucci, the last of the family to run the company, is walking up the steps to his office. And bam, he's shot 4 times. It was a professional hit, swift, brutal, and for 2 years, a total mystery. The murder of a fashion icon like this, it shocked Italy, it shocked the world. But who would want him dead? Well, as it turns out, the list of potential enemies was pretty long, and a whole lot of them had the last name, Gucci.
So, to figure out who is behind this, we've got to rewind. We need to understand the decades of pure chaos and conflict that led to that moment. And that story starts with one man, the guy who built the House of Gucci from the ground up.
This is where the legend begins. So you have Guccio Gucci. He'd been working at the fancy Savoy Hotel in London, and he got inspired by all the incredible luggage the wealthy guests had. So he goes back home to Florence, opens a tiny shop, and he has this really simple mission: make luxury leather goods and make them with perfect quality. That obsession with craftsmanship, that became the absolute foundation of the Gucci brand. And the business just grew and grew. Guccio brought his sons, Aldo, Vasco, and Rodolfo, into the company. Then, in 1953, Guccio dies, and he leaves this booming business to them. And that same year, his son Aldo, who was super ambitious, opens the very first Gucci store in America. That was the moment that really signaled Gucci was going to be a global powerhouse.
But here's the thing. Guccio also planted a kind of hidden poison in his own family. He had this strategy. He thought that by pitting his sons against each other, it would make them work harder, make them better businessmen. But what it actually did was create this culture of constant rivalry and this deep, deep mistrust that would just fester for generations. It's what ultimately tore the family and the company apart. So, after Guccio dies, that simmering rivalry, it just explodes. The second generation is now in charge, but they have completely different ideas about where Gucci should go next.
The real fight was between 2 of the main brothers, Aldo and Rodolfo. Aldo was the big personality, the showman. He wanted more stores, more products. He wanted Gucci to be everywhere. But Rodolfo, who was a former actor, was a traditionalist. He was terrified that all those big plans would make the brand feel cheap and ruin its exclusive reputation. And that fundamental disagreement, that was the crack that was going to break the whole Gucci empire.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any messier, boom, the third generation steps onto the scene. On one side, you have all those creative but super volatile son, Paolo. And on the other, Rudolfo's quiet, sheltered only child, Maurizio. Their own rivalry was basically like pouring gasoline on the fire their fathers had already started.
Paolo just felt totally sidelined all the time, and his frustration led to an all-out war. First, he tries to launch his own brand using the family name, which is a huge no-no, so the family fires him. So then he sues them. But his final move, his ultimate act of revenge, it was just unthinkable. He handed over financial documents to the IRS, knowing full well it would send his own 81-year-old father to prison for tax evasion. This quote from a lawyer involved at the time just says it all. Here we have to save Gucci from the Guccis. By the late 80s, the family was literally drowning in lawsuits they had filed against each other. The brand that the world saw as a symbol of luxury had become, internally, a symbol of pure chaos. The Guccis had become their own worst enemy. All this constant fighting just created this massive power vacuum, and one family member saw a chance to grab total control, even if it meant burning the family's legacy to the ground to do it. That someone was Maurizio. After his dad, Rodolfo, died, Maurizio inherits a 50% stake in the company. And then he does something no one saw coming. He teams up with his angry cousin Paolo. By combining their shares, they had just enough power to force his uncle Aldo, the man who basically built Gucci into a global empire, out of the company. Just like that, Maurizio, the quiet one, had staged a ruthless coup and made himself the new chairman.
And Paulo's little tip to the IRS? Yeah, it worked. Aldo Gucci was convicted of evading $7 million in taxes. He was sentenced to a year and a day in a U.S. prison. It was a shocking, humiliating end for a fashion king, all engineered by his own son.
But here's the twist. Maurizio finally gets what he wants, and he's terrible at it. As chairman, he spent a crazy amount of money on lavish new offices, but his actual business decisions were a total mess. Profits just plummeted. He had won the war for Gucci, but now he was losing the company itself. So by 1993, the company is just hemorrhaging money. It's on the brink of collapse, and Maurizio has no other choice. He sells his remaining shares to an investment group. And just like that, after 3 generations in 66 years, there were no Guccis left at Gucci. The family had lost everything.
And this brings us right back to where we started, to that bloody morning in Milan. Maurizio had lost the company, sure, but he was about to lose something way more valuable. The betrayals weren't over. In fact, the deadliest one was still to come, and it was at the hands of his estranged wife, Patrizia Reggiani. Patricia's rage had been building for years. First, Maurizio just walks out on her, tells her he's going on a short business trip and then just never comes back. Then he starts this very public new life with another woman. When he sold the company, in her eyes, he sold off their daughter's birthright. And then, when she had surgery for a brain tumor, he offered zero support. All that resentment just festered and festered until it turned into a deadly obsession.
So how did she pull it off? Well, Patrizia didn't get her own hands dirty. She was the mastermind. She went to her friend, who was also a psychic, Pina Uriyama, and had her organize the hit. Pina then got in touch with a hotel doorman, who then hired a pizzeria owner who was deep in debt, Benedetto Cerolo, to be the actual gunman. It was this messy, sordid little conspiracy that would eventually land all of them in prison.
And if you want a little window into Patrizia's mindset, just listen to this. A reporter later asked her why she hired a hitman instead of just shooting Maurizio herself. Her answer? My eyesight is not so good. I didn't want to miss. It's just so chillingly practical, almost darkly funny. It shows zero remorse, just cold, calculated focus. For 2 whole years, it really looked like Patrizia, who the press had nicknamed the Black Widow, had actually gotten away with it. But then the conspiracy started to fall apart when one of the people involved started bragging about the murder. An anonymous tip came in, the police set up a wiretap, and they captured all the evidence they needed. In a series of dawn raids, the whole plot was exposed, and the wheels of justice for Maurizio Gucci finally started turning. So in the end, the Gucci family completely destroyed itself over the very company their grandfather built. But here's the biggest irony of all. As soon as the family was out of the picture, the brands, under new creative vision from people like Tom Ford, had this incredible comeback. It became more successful than ever before. Which leaves us with this one last nagging question. Did the house of Gucci have to literally fall apart for the brands of Gucci to rise from the ashes?